Okay, so we're starting chapter 8 now, and you're going to find these problems aren't nearly as big as the ones in chapter 7. So we're going to talk about square roots in chapter 8. So we have to first get some idea of what we're talking about with these. First, we're going to talk about what we call squares. So if you take the number 4 and you square it, you get 16, right? If you take the number 5 and square it, you get 25. And then if you take the number 6 and you square it, you get 36. Now you can keep going and making a chart of what we call perfect squares. So that's what these are over here. Those are all numbers that are squares because we took a number and we raised it to the second power, okay? Now what we're going to talk about are square roots. So a square root is when we say something like, there's some number that if I square it, it would equal 81. Now, there are two numbers that will actually do that, 9 and -9. But don't get confused on that, okay? So later we'll talk about that in another chapter. But when we talk about square roots, we're talking about this symbol right here, and we're taking the square root of 81. When we do that, we call it the principal square root, and that is just 9. You don't write the square root symbol again. You just say it's 9, because if you took 9 and you squared it, you would get 81, all right? When we talk about the principal square root, then we talk about the positive number that will, if you square it, would equal 81, okay? So, and we write the square roots like this, that with that symbol there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the notation. So this symbol right here is called the square root symbol. And then you're going to have a number underneath it. That number is called the radicand. Now, that symbol that I've drawn, this right here, it's called the square root symbol. Okay, and so far that's all we're going to talk about. Now in a few videos we're going to talk about something else, but so far that's where we're going to start, okay? So you have squares and you have square roots. So you want to make sure you say the right one for what you mean, okay? All right. So now we're going to simplify. This first one, part A, says, what's the opposite of the square root of 64? Well, the square root of 64, I'm thinking what number times itself, if I squared it, would equal 64. And the number is 8, okay? So you don't have to write all that, but the answer is going to be the opposite then of 8, because 8 is the square root of 64, and then there's that negative sign in front of it. So that's why it's a -8, okay? I'm hoping that makes sense to you. All right. Hopefully. All right, and then the next one says, what's the square root of 225? Well, so there's some number out there that if you square it, it equals 225. Now, most of your calculators have a square root button, so if you have trouble with that, but it's 15. And notice that you just write 15. Sometimes I have students and they love the square root sign, and they want to keep making that. But no, once you take the square root of it, so once I take the square root of 225, it is 15, just plain 15. Because if I take 15 times 15, well, it better be 225. Yeah, it's going to be 225, right? Okay. So notice the notation and how we use it, and hopefully that helps, gets us started, and we'll move on to another video.